Hello and welcome back. We're going into 2025 and it is going to be a wild ride. So, what I want to do is just cover some of the basics of getting started with LLMs. And if you are starting out just now, you are coming in at the perfect time because the tooling cannot be any better. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you to some of the software, how it works. I'm going to run through some of the key terminology you need to understand. And then ultimately, I'll tell you what you should download and do first if you're just getting started. Of course, if I cover anything that you have a different opinion on, please let me know in the comments below. I am learning just as much as all of you, but I will tell you one thing. I wish I had a video like this when I was getting started, because a lot of this I had to learn through trial and error. So, without further ado, the first thing I want to cover is the different software to install. And there really are a series of probably five. There are more than I have on this list, maybe six, that you really should be aware of. My personal favorite is LM Studio, but I'm going to go through these one by one and just kind of show you sort of how this potentially works. So Aava is one that you run in the command line. And basically, if you feel comfortable working in a command line, it's super easy to set up. You can configure it to host the models locally, and you can host it locally on your network. It runs across Mac, Linux, and Windows. It is open source. Basically, there are a series of commands that you can run, and you can see in particular, like the main ones are if you run serve, it'll actually start your server so that you can connect to it. And if you run create, what you can do is you can actually load in a model. Basically, you create a model file that points to like a gguf file, gguf file, and then you can load that in, which I actually have here with this 5.4 Q8 latest. So I actually loaded that from a model file. Otherwise, you can actually just pull down like Llama 2 or Llama 3. I actually deleted Llama 3. I just don't run that well on my computer. This is one that you will need to have running if you run this enchanted mobile app. I actually really like this app because it allows me to basically have a interface so that I can talk to any of the AI models that I want to run, and I can do that from my own phone on my own network. This enchanted app does not work with the format that LM Studio actually runs it in. So it's just a different API pathing. But I will say, moving into LM Studio, this is by far my absolute favorite application. It is not open source, but it is free. And if I was just getting started, I wish I would have found this one first. I did not. But as soon as I did, it became my absolute go-to. It makes everything just so easy to test out. It has a great like developer section where you can go in, you can very easily start and stop a server. You can get configure some of the stuff. It has great configuration, which I'll go through some of the details of this. It's a great like model library. These are just the models I have downloaded, which is actually getting obscene at this point. So here I was looking for a Llama 3.3. I was looking for like a probably like a Q3 version of it to see how small those were. But let's say that I wanted to look up the QWQ model. You can usually find that. And notice that we got the gguf format here. I'm not actually sure how people say that it is just a gguf format. This is the one that I would recommend you starting with. You can within minutes get this set up. You can go in, you can search for Gwen, grab like um, any of those, or you can do Gemini. Do Gemma 2B, a super small model, downloads 1.71 gigabyte, and you're up and running within minutes. All right, the next one is Jan AI. Now, Jan AI, I also really like, but I like it for different reasons. I like it because I can switch between running my local models. You can see here it's telling me I'm getting low on RAM. It's because I have so much stuff open. But I can also switch to the cloud, and I have this configured so I can run Claude and OpenAI directly in my chats here. Personally, I like this because it allows me to interact with the APIs, and I'm not getting hit by the limits that I hit when I'm running in their interface. And it does such a great job of like managing all of that for you. And it's super easy to switch between them. And I've actually been really liking this O1 preview. So really what my workflow typically is, I work local with the majority of my stuff. Because if you're working on simple things, you just get that done locally. Then what you do is you switch over to Claude for the more complicated things. And sometimes Claude just gets it wrong. And then O1 preview or O1 mini is just great at doing the things Claude can't do. But it's usually my last resort. And then lately I've been playing around with the Google Flash one as well too. All right, so GPT-4 All. GPT-4 All is one that I haven't used a whole lot, but I do have it set up here. Um, the main thing I was testing in it is this QWQ model, and I pulled that in and played around with it. I think it's fine. Actually, I just downloaded this model. I wanted to try out this Reasoner V1, which apparently I've read some good things about. So maybe I'll report back on that to see how that actually performs. I only have two models on this one. I probably could actually remove this model because I've been using that more in LM Studio lately. But I do want to try this one. But again, it's a very similar chat interface. You know, you can load your models in. I only have the two. If I probably got to go eject some stuff to load the one in. If you want to load it in, you can load it. Let me see if this will actually load. It may because it's a smaller model. And go. Tell me a story about a bear. And that Reasoner V1's kicking in. It's fantastic interface. Like I've got really no problems with it. You can see down here in the bottom right, tokens per second. It does have a lot of like setting and stuff you can play around with, and I have played around with this, enabling this local API server. Uh, I actually just like the way the interface works in LM Studio, but this is great as well. And then let me go back in here, and the next one is anything LLM. Now, anything LLM is probably my second favorite. Basically, I use this with a combination of LM Studio. So I use LM Studio to serve my model, and then I use this to connect to it. But I also, this connects a lot of different things together. So, for example, if I'm doing like documents here, I can actually upload a bunch of documents to my particular model. You can see here these are cached, and basically they get vectorized, so I can actually ask questions about my documents. It works really good. The data connectors are great too, so you can like connect it to GitHub repo. I haven't tested the GitLab repo, but I have tested the YouTube transcript, which is also really great. And I was trying to get the bulk link scraper to work, but I've been having trouble getting this one up and running. They also have agents that you can run via here. So here, where are they going? Yeah, agents. So it's at agent, and they have like rag search, web scraping, web browsing. So you can kind of order the agent to kind of do exactly what you want to have done there. And then finally, Enchanted. This is a mobile app that. Let me see if I can find the link for it. Yeah, this is it right here. It's free. I've hooked it up to my Olama instance, able to ask questions for it. Looks like it runs on Mac as well. Pretty good reviews. And I will say it doesn't give you many like error codes or things when things go wrong, but once you get it working, it's absolutely phenomenal. Again, if I was starting out, I'd go LM Studio and I would probably layer in Enchanted and Olama next. I would probably go anything LLM if you're trying to play around with RAG. And then in the future, in another video, I want to actually cover agents because I've been messing around with LangChain and AutoGen, building different agents. And those are also like something that you can make to add on to your skill set on. Jan AI is fantastic, especially if you want to switch between local and remote. Uh, and I think you could do that with LM Studio. I just haven't figured out how to do that yet. And GPT-4 I've heard great things about it. I've only used it a small amount. There's only so much time, But honestly, LM Studio is just my absolute favorite. I worry though, because it's not open source, that there's probably a day that that becomes paid or closed, and then I'm going to be really sad about that. All right, so the next thing that you need to learn is these run types. And this is something, again, that you don't learn very easily. So, for example, if you're running a particular model, what you need to do is you need to also understand the particular settings that you actually have for that model. So let me see if I can find it here. Here we go. So runtimes. There are really four different runtimes maybe five actually, but I'm going to talk about four. I do not have an NVIDIA GPU in this computer right now. I have it in one of my other ones. You won't see like a CUDA. If I show all, it might actually show in there. So you see CUDA here. This one is specifically for NVIDIA. ROCm, ROCm, is for AMD. This is the one that I run. If you have an AMD card, you in particular want to have that one configured. If for some reason you're having trouble with ROCm, Vulkan is a good choice because it works on both NVIDIA and AMD cards. Because Vulkan is really a graphics programming um, API or layer. I don't know the right word to actually explain that. So it's sort of like a DirectX where it acts as an interface with the hardware. So you basically, there's a language that you interact with called Vulkan. And Vulkan actually is what executes command. It gets compiled down into actually commands that run on the GPU. If you want to run just on the CPU, you can run the CPU llama. So it's important to understand what each of these actually do and to make sure you have it configured correctly. Here's a little cheat sheet for that. The CPU one, the CUDA one, if you can, run on the GPUs. If the model will fit in there, even if you can put some of the layers in the model, sometimes it's quicker. Otherwise, fall back to CPU. If for some reason you're in an application that AMD is not working or they don't have ROCm, it's okay to run Vulkan. I've noticed Vulkan's a little bit slower, but sometimes it's fine, like it's not even noticeable. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to cover real quick is this format, GGUF, which from what I can tell stands for GPT Generated Unified Format, which put simply is formatted in such a way that you can run it on your local computer. That's really what it is. If you're running this on a computer, most likely you want to run it in the GGUF, the GGUF, which is what I call it, format. It's really just a binary format that's compressed down to allow you to load it and compute it locally. So another tip here is, let me go back here to my models in LM Studio, for example. So you can see the size here. I have 24 gigabytes of video RAM, so this one fits perfectly in there. Typically, what I like to do is anything that's like under 20 gigabytes, I feel like I can load pretty well. Anything that is, it gets around like 25, 30, 40, I can't load that into video RAM, and it's going to be incredibly slow. So the tip really is there is some overhead in your GPU, but you want your model size to really fit within your video RAM. So allow a little bit extra context. Now, quantization, I also probably just showed that a little bit. You may have noticed that over here. So you can notice like Q3, Q4, Q3, Q4, and so on. Where's a Q8? Here's a Q8. That's basically how compressed that model is. So the smaller the number, the smaller the model, but it also has given up a lot of precision. So it's going to run faster, but the quality will be lower. So for your particular use case, what you want to do is figure out what the right Q value is for you. I've downloaded Q2, Q4, Q8 for the same model just to see how it performed for me. It's really worth trying those different values. For the bigger models, let's say that something is coming in at 32 gigabytes, but I can get a Q4 and maybe it'll drop it down to within my video RAM format. I'll do the Q4 and I'll see how it performed. Q8 if I can, and you could probably see that from how I was doing the. Like one of my favorite models I've been running lately is this 54 Q8 here, 15.58 gigabytes, but it's a great model. And before that, I was running the Q4 one. Granted, these are unofficial. I just want to make sure that's clear. I don't think Microsoft has actually released the official version yet. So you can see like really the size difference between those two. And those might have been off of a different base as well, but they both have 14 billion parameters. The next thing I want to cover is this model configuration. And I'm going to load up here and just open up one of these guys. So every model might have slightly different things that you can play around with. For example, you can also modify the prompt for a particular model. This is important because there are times you really want to tune the output a certain way. You can also play around with the inference. This is something that a lot of people don't understand, which is temperature. So I have found when coding, the closer to zero you make it, the better. It's not always right. Like zero might actually not be right for every model, but I've high randomness when you're doing something with code has seemed to be worse for me. So you really want a lower temperature for coding. This is my personal opinion, and I read some research papers on it that also confirm this as well. But I would love to see what you guys' thoughts are on it. So if you're going to be using a model just for coding, try it at zero point 0.8, lower it down, try it again. Let's like see what the responses are. A lot of this is very much testing. If your context overflows, you can truncate the middle. This is what I really like. That way you keep the top context and then you lose a little bit in the middle, but you keep the end. This has been my favorite setting so far. And then the other things to really pay attention to is the GPU offload. So basically, the more you can offload to your GPU, the better. Because say let's say you have a 8 GB card, you might only be able to offload 17 layers. You'd have to test it and see. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. You might be able to offload all 40. And context. So this is the basically the number of tokens that can be supported within a single chat. So that counts like data that you sent in and data you're getting back. I I typically like to crank my context, but what you will notice is your GPU usage will also go up at the same time. So if your GPU usage goes up significantly, you may actually have to dial this back to, something a little bit more reasonable. And then the only other thing that I would say is like I touched on it a little bit, but sometimes stop strings are important. If you see a model, if you don't have it configured correctly and you see a model just continually talking to itself, typically it's because you don't have your stop string configured correctly. And you can usually tell that by the way the conversation's going. It could be a single word or it could be a series of characters, it could be anything. Just make sure like you kind of follow that. Like for example, I have a model that I was running on a llama that just kept going and going and going. I configured the stop string. It's totally fine after that. All right, now going back to RAG. So I touched on this a little bit, but RAG really is a phenomenal thing. It allows you to basically tokenize local documents and then ask questions about those documents. I showed you a little bit about that in anything LLM. So where you can like upload documents into here, you can tokenize it. There's also some settings here where you can do basically a bunch of configurations on how all of this stuff works. As you can see here, I've got like the 8 billion as the default here, and there's the URL. And I have the LLM provider as LM Studio. But anyway, the basically I you can use built-in embedding. You can also use open AIs. You can use Azure's, Cohere's, Mistral's. You can also just run a generic OpenAI. So if you have a one that meets those same API endpoints, you can run those. And really, what it's doing is if you have a model with a ton of context, it will actually go through and search those documents to see if it can find an answer. And if it doesn't have a lot of context, it'll actually go through. If you ask a question that's specific enough, you can do something like this and say, tell me about the number, tell me about how active users is calculated. And then what it'll actually do, I don't actually have that model loaded, so it's going to take a while. But anyway, it's going to start that agent. It's going to try to switch over. I probably need to go kill some models, to be honest with you, because if I do not, I'm going to end up running out of video again. So in closing, hopefully this is a good get starting guide for you. I'm absolutely in love with these LLMs, and I'm excited about what this next year is going to bring as far as technology. So please let me know, like, if there's anything that you think should be added to this list. Maybe I'll keep track, keep this updated, and run this like every year just to see how things are progressing. And if there's topics that you'd like to hear more of, please let me know that too. For example, a deep dive into React would be probably pretty fun to do, to be honest. All right, until next time, peace.